terms of gender diversity and also the roles we all take up, and I'm very excited for this discussion. And I think the idea is to each of the panelists will share their unique experience which they have with their uh, professional journey and while implementing the frameworks. So my first question would be, what are the challenges with respect to data privacy and data governance in the context of collection, processing, storage of data, and how do you plan to cope with them, and what has been your experience? So I'll request each of the panelists to sort of share their views on this. So I think we'd start with you, Anindya.
Thank you, Yukti. Uh, uh, Good afternoon, everyone, for joining us here. So, Yukti, I think when we talk about data privacy today, one of the key concerns that I understand or we see in the market is knowing what is private to you. Uh, we have our information all across the internet. We're getting calls every other day, and we don't know how much of that should be private to us. What the second bigger concern is, how is that getting leveraged, right? So how do they utilize this data? Now, when I talk about the financial sector, one of the most regulated sectors in the country, it is, so when I do a KYC today, all my information is provided to the operator, to the banking, to the bank. But am I really concerned? Am I really making sure that that data is secured and is not being published anywhere else? And that's a key criteria that we need to understand before we can take necessary actions to data privacy and data storage throughout the life cycle of the data, right? Now, apart from this, another key concern is, what if the data is leaked? Is there solutions in the market which can help identify the leak at the source and make sure that it is not getting pushed to the dark web? Dark web is probably everyone knows about it, but we really don't really go over there to find out whether our data is leaked out or not. So these are the parameters where we see there needs to be a very strict guideline, a policy, a privacy law which should protect us.
Dr. Bharat.
Thanks, Yukti. Good afternoon, everyone. So a very pertinent question, I would say, Yukti, that you have posed to all of us. So in my experience and my opinion, would stand that and would say that data today is really powerful. Every organization utilizes data to make better decisions, to reduce operational costs, to streamline their operations, right? And something that is valuable will have to be protected. And the protection of that data is something that we will all have to work with the help of certain regulatory frameworks and with the help of certain policies that have to be put in place. However, having said that, digital trust is something the financial sector should now focus on. What do you mean by digital trust, right? So digital trust is a customer's expectation that his data, the technology that uses that data, and the organization that uses that data will use to meet his expectations, as well as use that data in an ethical and a responsible manner. That is the definition of digital trust. Now, if organizations, especially the financial services industry, has to move towards digital trust, they need to have a robust data strategy, right? A data strategy has various components in it, privacy one among them, security, data governance, and so on. But from a privacy standpoint, I believe that data governance is its best friend. So a data strategy with a robust data governance, which actually helps the privacy compliance requirements, is currently the need of the hour. And as I see the different privacy programs across the financial services, across the FinSec industry, I believe organizations are lacking a robust data strategy, having a robust data governance program. And currently I see among all the implementation challenges of privacy, I think this is the biggest challenge that the organizations will have to address.
Thank you. Very relevant points.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shraff. So I'll start with one question. Who know what is zettabyte? Does any know about zettabyte? Okay, it's 1 billion TB of data. And it is expected that by 2025, almost 181 zettabyte of data would be either processed, or it will be generated, or it would be stored somewhere, right? Now the biggest challenge for any organization is today, so everyone is looking for digitization, right? They want to go digital. And digital leaves a lot of footprints in terms of data. But there's a lot of a gold pot which is available for organization to use from that data. But still I remember a quote from 1983 best-selling book on business, which is The Search of Excellence, which says that organizations are data rich and information poor. So what do you mean by that, right? So it means that organizations have a lot of data, but they do not have information of it, right? So when we are talking about information, it is like context out of that data, right? So today, if I, as a bank, I have to mine the data, I want to understand customer behavior, customer expectation to give them more personalized service, which is banking 4.0, so to say, right? But to use, and also it will ensure that my bottom line and all other profits comes in, right, because of customer expectation. So for that, we need to have a good data management strategy, which is coupled with privacy, because you cannot decouple privacy with data governance, because it goes hand in hand, right? Everywhere it is data. And which will ensure that any organization can get information richer, and we can kind of negate the old thing which is still valid after 35 years, that organizations are data rich but information poor.
Yeah. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So very well touched upon the points related to KYC, digital trust, and data governance. So this particular panel discussion is purely around data strategy. So data strategy doesn't mean how you strategically manage your data alone, but it is a combination of both data governance and data privacy. So from my standpoint, I would like to put across some of the perspectives that, as Mr. Dr. Bharat mentioned, data is everything in today's world. And this large volume of data generated, be it from your advanced technology landscape, which is basically your IoT devices, mobile devices, everything is data in today's world. And it's very important to protect the data. As Mr. Rajendra mentioned, that a good data governance is something, it is a need of the hour for most of the organizations. And today there are a lot of vulnerabilities that we are seeing and the threats from the data perspective. You hear about any data breaches, it's all about the personal data or intellectual property that is being lost. So from the challenges standpoint, I feel that the organizations should have a broader visibility of the data. So how many of the organizations have the data lake? How many of them even know how much of data is flowing into their organization? So that's primary focus for most of the organizations, to have a better governance around the data that is coming into the organization, building the analytics on top of the data that you're seeing. How do you even identify which is critical for an organization? How do you map it to the risk? Managing your privacy is equal to managing your risk for an organization. So that is my perspective on the challenges that are being faced. And along with this, there are certain things that as an organization that we should ensure as well, more on the insider threat risks that we are seeing. So how many of us even have looked at it? So that is something that we should have as a program developed within the organization, because not every risk is coming through the external factor. It can also be your internal risks as well. So these are my perspectives and challenges on the data privacy standpoint.
Thank you so much. Very diverse views. And I think we'll move on to our second question. So, to Pavitra and Anindya, what has been your experience with implementation of data governance in the organizations, and what are the common challenges?
Okay, so if I can take up this question, so most of you are already aware, data governance is all about your policies, your rules, and the frameworks that you can have. So from the data governance standpoint, the most critical or the primary step that an organization can take up is on the data classification. Unless and until you don't know what is your data, you haven't classified the data, you don't know what is the risk that is coming out of data, you wouldn't be able to have a successful data governance implemented across the organization. So that's going to be the primary point from the data governance standpoint. And next comes the data security. So once you have classified the data, what is the level of security that you would like to have? So from the data protection standpoint, if you're going for any solutions like data loss prevention or your endpoint detection response or any other tools, so they have to be tailored to your organizational needs. So for example, from the data loss prevention, if you are implementing certain policies, what is the fine tuning of the policy that you would like to do? Which particular data you want to ensure it is blocked at your perimeter level? So these are certain things that you need to be aware of. And coming to the next important point, again on the data privacy policies, depending on the location that you're operating from, how important it is for you to comply to the regulatory requirements, because financial sector is all about the regulated industry. There is high level of regulation that is going to be coming with all the new data privacy laws that are coming up. So it's important for you to also be mindful of the compliance and the regulatory requirements that needs to be met. And apart from this, as I already mentioned in my previous response, so you need to also have the user behavioral analytics as part of the data governance, because you want to monitor what is the data that is frequently going out of the organization, or what is the data that you can build your risk metrics upon. Unless and until you have the visibility of the data within your environment, you would not be able to be talk about the risk perspective, or you wouldn't be able to even protect that data. So data classification, data security, and from the privacy standpoint, there's a lot of need for us to have the anonymization, pseudonymization of the data. Data masking is very important. Segregation of duties also plays a very important role. Access control is something that we should be mindful of. And if you're talking about the cloud, localization of the data is also equally important, because some of the regulatory recommends that, for example, for some of the Chinese citizens' data, if you're looking at the critical infrastructure related industry, so they regulate it to be within the China, whatever the data that we are storing and processing. So there are different aspects of it, but from the data governance standpoint, I think there has to be a robust framework that is implemented, And on top of it, it's very important for us to have a risk-aware culture where we are ensuring that our team members or the employees are also equally aware of the do's and don'ts, and that's very important is what I feel.
Thank you so much, and really delving deep into it. That
Thank
really
you.
helps, to cover all the aspects of governance. So, Anindya, what would you like to add?
I think she covered most of it. I think one other key aspect which I feel as part of implementing such a data aware culture is the self awareness, the user behavior which she touched upon. But I think as users today, we really need to be aware of what we are dealing with today. If I look at any large organization, they're all in a hybrid infrastructure layer. They're all uh, taking control of cloud. The shadow IT is becoming a larger piece, which usually is not under the complete paradigm of data governance today. Uh, Shadow IT, unless brought under the complete scope of data governance, will always be a clear loophole in terms of the data loss that we see today. So I think awareness, user behavior, and making sure that uh, even if there is shadow IT today, once critical infrastructure, critical applications moves towards this hybrid cloud and the public cloud, we should have the data governance managed across them.
Thank you. So, I think we have covered data governance in a good amount of detail. Uh, Another aspect which we wanted to as a group discuss was the impact of public policy, and how it is going to change the way organizations deal with data. So I have a question to Dr. Bharat in this regard. Uh, how can public policies enable to enable the financial sector to have an effective data strategy, and how will that help in meeting privacy compliance? What are your views on the interoperability of data, pursuant to the new rules and the uh, framework which has been shared by the government?
Uh, So to your question, Yukti, I think the answer to the first part seems to be pretty straightforward, and we have seen the success of these government initiatives, and you all know where I'm heading towards, right? Uh, so to enable the financial sector to have a really good data strategy, utilize a lot of data across the industry, monetize that data, uh, use that data for, as I said, operational effectiveness, better decision making, offering the customers the right sort of products and services. I think the public-private partnership is the key. And from the success stories that we have seen, say for example, we have seen the open banking through UPI, right? We have seen the account aggregator ecosystem that is just developing. We are seeing UIDAI opening up their Aadhaar ecosystem for validating certain users for performing their KYC. So this has really enabled a lot of the financial sector to utilize the publicly available data, which is very rich in nature. So if you look at all the government coffers, I mean, they are rich in data of all the particular citizens of India. So leveraging that particular partnership plays a very key role from a public policy enablement standpoint. Having said that, on the other side of it, I think there are two challenges that private organizations face in my experience. So clearly one of the challenges is, I mean, there are too many regulatory restrictions at the sectoral level, for example, where the free usage of data is curtailed. Of course, there have to be proper controls, but I think the data can freely move within an organization, say for example, a group company offering multiple products and services. it can freely move within an organization using lawful grounds of processing, which is very well documented under the GDPR, or using customer consent or user consent to utilize this data across the organization. So if we can solve for that one challenge by giving a leeway of this particular control to private organizations, I think it will be a better leverage of data for the financial sector. The second challenge, of course, is the sectoral conflicts. A number of times we come across the regulatory requirements where one regulation conflicts with the other, right? And that is where organizations face a lot of hurdle and challenges as to which regulation trumps the other. So in these cases, I think the private organizations also need to step up and have a forward-thinking privacy leadership and push the regulators in the right direction so that the regulators understand that whatever harmonization is required between the regulators is enabled for the financial sector for them to utilize the data in a better manner. I think if we can resolve these two challenges, I think from a public policy standpoint, it will be a great usage of data that we can leverage, and it will benefit both the users, that is the consumers, as well as the private organizations. That's my take.
Thank you. I think, we were discussing before this that when we talk about public policy and the way the policies are going to evolve and the law is going to evolve for data governance and data privacy in India, what we're looking at is that, we just completed 5 years of GDPR being into effect. And a lot of us who have been, implementing GDPR and looking at the way it's evolving, there are two schools of thoughts when we look at data policy. One is when you have a broad principle-based approach where the government or the law, the regulator gives broad principles and you are supposed to operate within those broad principles, but it's up to your discretion how you interpret it. And it has taken so long for GDPR to, everybody, have their interpretation of how exactly it will work, and it's still work in progress. So one is the approach, which is a principle-based approach. The second approach is very prescriptive, where you have exact, for instance, regulators coming out with exact requirements that this is the bare minimum, this is how you're supposed to operate. They give very detailed guidelines. And so in India, we need to see which of the two approaches works better, whether a principle-based approach, where organization, the industry has the freedom to decide, or, see on a particular principle what should be the right way to govern it. Because the way technology is evolving, a principle-based approach seems better with evolving technologies, because that's how everybody will have to think about, because it's evolving so fast. You use the principle and then you keep applying it each time there's a new problem or there's a new product. So that is one thing which we are going to look at, how, going forward, the new law or the guidelines which come under, the rules which are coming under it, how prescriptive they are, or how much freedom they give to the organizations themselves to self-regulate, to see how they want to implement the spirit of the law. So that's going to be very interesting, and we are going to be looking at it in the next few years. That's my take on how public policy will shape up. I have a question for Rahul. Moving on from the policy aspect to on-ground experience. So Rahul wanted to understand what has your experience been with implementation and data governance on ground?
A very pertinent question, Yukti, and I think we have 5 minutes left. I will try to wrap up quickly before it. So I'll like to first touch on the metaphor which is going on. Everyone knows about is data is a new oil, right? But to an extent it is right, because when you talk about it in terms of value, it is generating the same value, right? So in today, mostly the companies who are having high revenues are database driven company, Amazon of the world and Google of the world. But data in itself if you compare from the oil from the complexity perspective, data is very complex, right? As I told you, there are so many uh, tons of data which is going to be there, and how you're going to use it as per your organizational need is something which is going to be a challenge and which is challenging. And there I think that couple of good data governance strategies plus which is coupled with data principle strategies would certainly play a role, right? So couple of pointers would be first the quality and accuracy of the data, right? Which is one of the principles in data privacy, that accuracy is one of the principles, right? So let's say I have a 2 systems or 3 systems, right, where uh, my data is there, but in first system it is my first name, second name, last name. In other system it is last name, first name, second name. And accordingly the date of birth are also different, right? So MMDDYY, DDMMYY. So these are the common challenges which everyone feel is there in their organization, right? So making the, so ensuring the good quality of data is key for generating value out of the data, because if you not have a common set of data, the intelligence which will come out from the data would not be as accurate as it has to be, right? The second biggest challenge or second biggest point which I see is the visibility of data. Every organization have data graveyards, right? So data graveyards is you have a data which is lying there and you do not know it is there, right? And if you do not get the visibility of the data, it is very difficult for your teams to get a value out of it, right? So getting the visibility of data and ensuring that the data graveyards doesn't exist clearly makes sense, and it has to be there in terms of discovering your data across organization. Because if you have a humongous data, there's a paradox of choices, right? So how you're gonna, if you want to get value of that data, so which data you want to choose, right? So you have to ensure that you have that visibility of the data plus the flow of data to ensure that what all systems, what all people are touching data from the security and privacy side. So these are the couple of challenges which I've seen, and then having good framework in place for data governance and implementing good controls will certainly help you to overcome that, but it's a big journey for every organization because we are not used to think about data in that way, right? And it's not just with India, across the globe, right? And hence the old saying what I repeated earlier is every organization is data rich but information poor.
Thank you, and you ended with that phrase. So I think now that we've had a good round of discussion, I wanted to get some questions from the audience and hear if you have anything specific to be asked from any of the panelists.
Hi, good afternoon. My question to the panel is, when we talk of data strategies, in real life, say, there are few challenges. One is data silos are there. So this is one of the challenge which is there. And another challenge which I believe is data ownership. So there are a lot of cross-functional, the same data, there are a lot of cross-functional owners are there, they are using that data. But when the question comes of that ownership, who owns it, so that is again becomes in theoretical way we can say data stewards are there, but practically how to address these two challenges?
I'll take up that question, right? Again, the thing I spoken about data graveyards and having visibility of data and ensuring that, and you're right that everyone faces that challenge, right? Because when it comes to ownership, nobody wants to take it, but everyone wants to use that data, right? So we need to have a clear metrics and clear AC defined for each groups in an organization, and it really drills from the seniors, senior management, if and the tracy has to be approved at the top level, and then visibility of data coupled with that would try to help that problem. But as I told you, right, it's a journey for many organizations, so it will be a challenge for some time, but that is how you can try to solve that particular problem.
Yeah, if I can add one point there. So it's a very good question. Thanks for asking it. So as Rajendra Prasad already covered, see, the robust data governance policy or the framework when you have within the organization. It's all about how well you are implementing it. Not just at the implementation level, there has to be a regular monitoring around it. The leadership team plays a very important role when it comes down to implementation of it, or rather at the ground level, to ensure how it is being taken care. Data silos is a very good question that you brought up. Yes, that is currently we are seeing. Whenever we are calling for any of the customer care, they do ask how many times, they ask us our name, date of birth, they keep asking. Same thing when you go to another customer care of the same organization, so they do ask. So there has to be a central repository of all the data that is being collected. So only then we would be able to streamline and ensure the duplication of all of these are going to be eradicated. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
If I may just answer the gentleman's second part of the question, where who owns the data, right? I think with especially Indian organizations now becoming privacy aware and trying to identify all the data that lies in the ecosystem, I think this is a very common question that we have been seeing. And I think this concept of a controller and a processor is very much embedded under the GDPR. We still haven't yet adopted that, and maybe through the privacy bill, we will have data fiduciaries as a concept that will come through. So how do you actually identify who is the owner of the data is through identifying who actually has collected the data in the first place, who actually has defined the purpose for collection of that data. Now, once that has been identified, and that is an exercise in itself where you actually create a data inventory across your organization, you classify data and provide owners for that. After that, I think data will flow through the organization. If, say, you all are offering multiple products and services, it will flow through your organization. But that doesn't mean that everyone who is utilizing that data becomes the owner. It will only be the source and the person or the particular team who has procured the data in the first place becomes the controller of that data, and he will be the owner of that data for that particular purpose. Now, there are different nuances to that, no doubt about it. Say, for example, data is flowing from payments to insurance, right? These are different regulators. Now, as it moves from one industry to the other, there might be a new purpose for which data is collected by the insurance team, right? So in that scenario, the purpose has changed, so the controllership changes from the payments team to the insurance team. So there will be these different nuances and challenges that we'll have to look at, but primarily, it all depends on who has collected the data, the source, and the purpose for which the person has collected data. He becomes the owner of that data in the initial phase, and then later on, we'll have to keep on analyzing. It will be a dynamic exercise that we will have to keep on carrying throughout the organization.
Moves from one person to another person, because when we say, sir, from the point of collection to the point of final archival or final retention, or putting it at a say at a lake point, so there will be different. So my assumption is there can be chances that there will be different ownerships. From one person to another person, it will also flow as the data flows, sir.
Yeah, so on that front, I can add one point. From the data governance standpoint, organizations should look at implementing data lineages. So data lineage solutions will help you to understand how the data is being flowed from source to destination, which are the different ways that it is being utilized within the network is what you will get to know. So, and accordingly the controls can be implemented. So that is from the technical standpoint.
Excuse me. Hello, I have one question. It is directly related to me.
Yeah, sorry, just before that, I just want to understand whether we have addressed your question. Okay, thank you.
So I'm Vicky Kalwande, founder and CEO of VK Control, SlickBill. It's a very popular software for GST. So now when my customer buy the subscription, so this data owner are us. Then when they generated the invoices, then these invoices owners are there, my end user customer. But when they make the e-invoice, then GSTN are the owner. So it's a very complex. who is the end owner of that all data? Because whole data resides at my server. So I am the whole and sole owner of this data, or the end users, or the GSTIN.
So, sir, I may answer that question. Ownership always lies with individual, right? So we are just media custodian of data. And that's what in the bill you see the relationship of principals and fiduciary. So ownership is always an individual. We become custodian of that data, and obviously when the custodianship changes, we have to ensure that we have proper arrangements in place, that how we are gonna ensure that the thing for which the customer has given his consent freely to us, we ensure that that is getting implemented across the board.
So here the complexity is everyone having the access of the same data. For the same data, everyone having the access. So who decides who is the owner of this whole data?
No, so that's why I told you, owner is individual at the end. I own my own data, right? I have right of self-determination with my data. I don't want anybody to use the data I want to use everybody the data I want them to use, right? But the custodianship obviously changes, and whosoever is holding that data at that point of time, let's say once the you as a TSP gets the data and then you passes to different bodies, so you would be have to ensure that you are ensuring the security of whatever privacy of data at your end, and accordingly you will have to have proper arrangements or agreements in place that where the ownership of controls would lie. So that is how you have to look at it.
And yeah, just to add to what Rahul just said, I think Rahul also is talking more from a rights perspective, that who is actually owning that data. So clearly it is an individual who owns the data eventually. But if you look at it from an organization standpoint, right, you are talking about GSTIN, you are talking about you as invoice processing software company.
Yes.
And there might be different multiple parties who are helping you as a sub-processor to process that data.
And then again, four parties involved in this whole chain, supply
Absolutely.
chain, banks. When they made the payments, it is recorded, and when they file their GSTR, then also recorded. So such kind of the multiple parties are taking of this ownership of the data.
Absolutely. So I think to resolve this particular complexity, what needs to be looked at as you as an organization, if you have collected certain elements, data elements about an individual, you are required to protect that data, as Mr. Rahul was just pointing out. You need to protect that data because you are the controller for which you have procured that data, right? Because it's your software, you are generating the invoices, and hence you have collected the data elements. No doubt, the data elements that were given to you were first owned by, say, GSTIN. So they are owners in their own right, and you become an owner as soon as you procure from GSTN into your systems. So that is where I think we need to be very clear on the segregation, that once data flows into your organization, I think the purpose changes. GSTN had collected the data because they wanted to generate the GSTN for the customer. When it moves to your organization, it is for invoice generation. The purpose has changed. As soon as the purpose changes, you become the owner of that data, and you have a responsibility towards that data as a data controller or as a data fiduciary in our new concept in the new bill. So that is where the complexity can be resolved. But I understand these are very complex nuances that we will have to sit down and actually look at. But absolutely a pertinent question that we are coming across everywhere.
And then second part, when my customer paid their invoice, they have two options. They may be pay via RTGS NEFT using the bank, and second option is QR code. They are using like PhonePe, Google Pay, any other
Yes.
app. So when they are paying via NEFT RTGS, then bank also get their data, and when they pay via QR code or UPI ID, then company like yours also get the data. So
Absolutely.
now this data is flowing through very means enormous channels, different channels, different industries, and all these industries are totally different. They are not related to each other, but just making the infrastructure like it's makes whole complexity to know who is the owner of the data. Final answer is anyone is don't know who is the owner of the data.
No, I think the final answer is the logic remains the same. So the same logic would apply irrespective of how many number of parties you have in the ecosystem. As soon as one owns the data for a particular purpose, they become the owner for that particular purpose and they need to protect it. I think the logic applies similarly across the ecosystem.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you for being such a great audience, and thank you all the panelists for being so patient with the questions. Um, it was great hearing your views, and thank you so much, Shivangi, for bringing us together.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all panelists for joining us for this session. I think this was truly insightful. We covered the whole gamut of topics, from how, what are the strategic interventions that organizations can implement, to how laws and policies can facilitate them in doing so. I'll request you to stay back on stage for a moment, and I'll request the crew to distribute the speaker mementos. This is a small token of appreciation for joining us from DSCI. There's also a lucky draw for this session. I'll request the panelists to draw the to find out who the winner for the lucky draw is. Can I have the bowl of people who have put in their names for the lucky draw on stage, please?
So the person is Arpurva. Do we have her here? Him. Him. Should we pick another one?
So take another.
Yeah, pick new things. Here you go.
We have Darshan Wadika, Third Eye Solution. Darshan from Third Eye Solution.
Darshan from Third Eye Solutions. Are you here?
Finally, I will.
Yeah? Third time's the charm. Prasad, if you're here, Prasad from the DSCI team. We can't give it to DSCI. Okay. Okay.